Okay, so I was saying that we are looking at today. We'll be looking at the various means to which we learn a language. These are so
So
these ones are
these
have
ones
been
have
discussed
been
theoretically.
theoretically.
Hey, why am I receiving
Why
feedback?
am I receiving feedback?
um
Um,
yeah, I think
yeah, I
someone's
think
mic
someone
is
might.
on, so I'm getting
Oh, I'm
feedback.
getting
Okay,
feedback. Okay, so
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 as I was saying, we look when we talk about
as I was saying,
language.
look at
Last
it
week we
about
looked at
language.
how language is defined. We looked at the various
Look
functions
at
of
the
language.
function of language.
So today we
So
are
we
going to
are going
focus
to
on the
focus on
various means through which language is learned, or the various theories that describe to
that
us how
describe.
language is learned, right? So there are fundamentally a lot of theories, but we are going to focus on just a few. We are going to look at behaviorism as a theory. Then we'll move on to cognitive theory. We'll look at social culture theories of language. We'll look at Krashen's hypothesis regarding language acquisition. Right. So this is what we are going to do. So today's class is going to focus purely on the theoretical understanding of how language is learned. Good. So we are going to start briefly with behaviorism as a psychological underpinning on how language is learned. Okay, so when we talk about behaviorism is built on some principles. One principle is that behaviorism is built on the principle that learning should be external and observable. Learning is external and observable. What do you mean by learning is being is begins it is or goes on to an external processes that or learning being external is that they believe that learning begins when someone is introduced with a stimuli. Something must be given to the learner before the learner is able to learn. Therefore, in their view, the learner doesn't have knowledge inbuilt internally. They acquire language externally. Someone has to provide them with a stimuli. Someone has to provide them with an input before they are able to learn. Yes, so that is what one principle of behaviorism. And they are also saying that learning should be observable. Once the input is given to you, to the only way you can show that you have learned is by bringing out an output. So once there is an input to show that you have learned, there should be an output. But that output should be correct. It should be accurate. Yes? Please, are you following? Yeah. So that is two major principles of the behaviorist theory. They are saying that first, language or learning itself should be is instigated by an external stimuli, meaning that before learning can occur, you have to give the learner an input. You have to give the learner the knowledge. You have to expose the learner to the language because the learner doesn't have language in their brains themselves. The language comes to the learner comes to class as an empty slate. The learner comes to your class with nothing at all. Okay, so it is the teacher who has to give the learner the knowledge. Right. So that is what they mean. Learning should be is external, and then learning should be observable. The only way we can see that you have learned is when you show evidence of your learning, when you produce correct output. So, for example, if I teach you what a noun is, and then I give you an exercise and I ask you, identify nouns in a passage. If the learner is able to identify the nouns, it means that learning has occurred. But if the learner is unable to identify the noun, maybe the learner underlines a verb and an adjective instead, it means that learning has not taken place. Therefore, I have to go back and give the learner the stimuli again, reward the learner, give the learner what we call reinforcement. I'll explain that one too, until we have to continue to repeat the learning, repeat the knowledge a number of times until the learner is able to identify the noun. We don't stop repeating the inputs. Do you get it? Good. So this one tenant of behaviorism. They also believe in repetition, reinforcement leading to habit formation. Repetition, reinforcement leads to habit formation. What I mean by this is that they believe that learning is like forming a habit. How do you form a habit? You continuously do a thing for a long time. Okay, if you want to form the habit of reading, what you do is that you target a time within a day, and then you are consistent in reading within that time of the day. And they are saying that within 21 days, you have formed that habit. So behaviorism is also saying that regarding language learning, if you want the child to acquire a language, you have to take the child through a repeated process. You repeat the knowledge you give them, and repetition will help them to form the habits. They will help them to acquire the language. Please, are you following? Right. So the first thing I said is that behaviorism, they believe that learning is external and observable, meaning that learning needs a stimuli. You have to give the child a stimuli, and then the child will produce the response. Without the stimuli, the child cannot produce the output. Without the knowledge the teacher will give, the child doesn't have any input to produce, any output to produce. You get it? And then they are also saying that learning is backed up by repetition, leading to repetition with reinforcement, leading to habit formation. Reinforcement simply means that a system of activities that is done to ensure that the correct behavior is repeated. For example, if, like I use the instance of the noun, for example, if the learner is unable to identify the nouns, okay, and for some time I've been repeating it, the series of activities that I will do to ensure that the learner is able to produce the output that I want is what we call reinforcement. It can be positive or negative. We will delve into that. So basically, behaviorism as a theory for language learning states that learning should be observable. Learning occurs through an external stimuli, meaning that the learner does not have knowledge on their own. The learner doesn't have language on their own. They learn a language because they were introduced to it. You have to put the learner in an environment where they can learn the language before the learner is able to learn. But on their own, they don't have any inbuilt structure that will help them to learn the language. So then in this sense, the learner is very passive. Okay, the learner is a passive receiver of whatever the teacher gives him, because it is believed from this theoretical perspective that the learner cannot produce the output unless he's given the input by the teacher or by the instructor. So in this sense, until the instruction is given, the learner is passive. The learner doesn't have anything to produce in the learning context. Learning is directly dependent on the instructor. Right. So that is the basic tenets regarding behaviorism as a theory for learning and a theory for language learning. So let's remember what I said. Behaviorism is built on the tenet that learning is external and observable, and that we learn through imitation, observation, constant practice, reinforcement leading to habit formation. You have to give the child the input, that is the knowledge, and then you repeat the input when the child, till the child is able to produce the response. If the child gives you the response and it is good, you add reinforcement, a reward, okay, so that the child will repeat the positive outcome again. But if the child does not produce the appropriate response, then you give another reinforcement that is negative. Okay, you restrain the child from some of the things that they like till they learn the output that you want. That is what we mean by behaviorism. Right. Good. So now let us also take note that with behaviorism, the learner enters the class totally empty. They believe that when a learner enters the classroom for the first time, until the learner is taught, the learner doesn't know anything on their own. The learner is a clean slate. They call the person a clean slate. A clean slate has nothing on them. It is the teacher that will inscribe something on the slate for the learner. Right. And now, because they believe that learning occurs through an external factor. Someone has to give the child the knowledge, or the learner has to receive the knowledge they will know from somewhere. Okay. Then it means that the child has to imitate the person providing the knowledge. Okay. The person has to observe and imitate the person continuously before the learning can take place. That is why usually in the basic school, when they are learning the letters of the alphabet or they are learning the phonemes, the teacher will have to produce the phonemes, the learners listen to it, and then they also reproduce. So as they are reproducing for a number of times, every day you when you go to class, you write the phonemes on the board. They are producing the phonemes every time. You see that it will get to a time they will build the phonemes. They will learn, they will have it off head. At that time, we say that the habit has been formed because they were constantly observing and imitating what you were doing. Please, are you following? Yes. So that is
Yes,
the
Manda.
basic.
You're following.
That is what we mean by the behaviorism as a theory. Good. Right. So because with this theory, the teacher, you can see that the teacher plays a very significant role, or the environment plays a very significant role in the child's language learning, because it is from the environment that the learner is said to receive the input. It is from the teacher or the environment. You know, the environment can, depending on where the learner is learning the language. If the learner is learning the language as a second language in school, the teacher, the classroom environment, the classroom, their peers, they all form part of the learner's environment. If the child is learning perhaps the first language, then the learning environment consists of all the people around him that are interacting with the child using the language. You get it? So in behaviorism, the environment where the learner is learning is very important. If the environment is not producing the appropriate input, the learner will learn the wrong thing, because we are saying that before the learner enters the learning environment, the learner doesn't know anything. So it is that environment that is going to teach the child. So if the environment is not producing the appropriate input, know that the learner is going to learn that input as well. But if the teacher or the instructor or the environment is providing the learner with the appropriate input, then it is more likely that the learner, with appropriate reinforcement, the learner will produce appropriate outcome. Okay, so this goes to say that in the classroom, last week we learned that in the English language classroom, we are passing down 4 fundamental skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing. It means that if you are the language teacher and the child is going to imitate you to learn those 4 skills, then it means that the teacher has to be equally good in all those 4 skills. If you are a teacher and your language use is problematic, the students will learn it. Students are going to imitate that behavior and it will become their habit. Right. I have encountered colleagues. A colleague of mine approached me and said he had, his handwriting was not very good. Okay. And then he was given a class to teach some time ago. He realized that all of the students started writing like him. They were all writing like he did. And even those that had the best handwriting before, their handwriting were looking like the teacher's own. You see? So in that class, you can see a clear sense of behaviorism. Right. So it means that for appropriate output, the best output to produce by the students, the teacher has to be very good. Okay, the teacher has to be proficient in their 4 language skills. Right. Okay. So with all of this said, we are going to look at some of the usefulness of behaviorism as a theory that explains learning and language learning. All right. It says here that it is the first theory that ever explained language learning. Okay. Most of the theories that explain learning, behaviorism began the theory. Now it explains how writing and then speaking begins. Okay. Yes, it gives us an explanation of how writing begins. So in this sense, writing or speaking will begin when the child is placed in an environment where they can imitate, they can observe and imitate. Right. That is why in the lower levels, they learn writing by they start by tracing the strokes, right? They trace the strokes. They get to a time the letters of the alphabet, they trace them. So they trace them until they develop that habit. Now you give them the writing book, you still see that they've written the uppercase A, the lowercase a in the book. So the idea is that the learner will imitate what is in the book and produce the right outcome. So if the learner brings their book and then the way the child wrote the A is not good, what do? You erase it and you tell the child, go back, look at it and write the same thing. What you are doing is behaviorism. You want the child to observe that thing and produce the outcome. Okay. Now, although behaviorism explains language learning, especially at the early ages, okay, at the early ages, they will need a lot of behaviorism to get them to learn. However, it ignores one important thing, that the learners that come to our class, they are not empty slates we say they are. Okay, as far as they are coming from an environment, as far as they are coming from a home, they are coming from a society before they came to the classroom, they know something. So it is not right for us to say that the child is an empty slate. Okay, before the child enters your English language class, the child has learned their first language. So they have learned language before. You get it? So they've already built a structure for language learning. So it is wrong to say and ignore the fact that the learners already have existing knowledge or understanding before they entered your classroom. However, they are only in your classroom. Your work is to direct their experiences so that they can learn the second language. But it is an error to say that they don't know anything at all. Right. So that is one criticism against the behaviorist theory. It fails to recognize the fact that learners have existing knowledge. And at any point in their learning, they build on this existing knowledge to help them to learn new things. Right. Good. Before you teach a child come in English, the child knows bra in chi. Okay, the child knows come in ga. The child knows come in their local language. Okay, so what you have to do is to now you are teaching the child that fine in your local language they say this, but in English it is this. You have to redirect the child's experience. Right. Now another thing about the theory is that it makes the learners passive. It makes the learners because it assumes that the learners do not have any existing structure to help them to learn a language. They believe that the learner should depend solely on the teacher or the environment to learn the language. So the learner is passive throughout. Okay, when we are teaching them how we are teaching them nouns, for example, we do not question them. We write different types of noun on them. We do not critique them. Why do you think that this particular why is it that we do not attach articles to proper nouns? Okay, the behaviorist teacher will not ask such a critical question, but will rather give the learners a whole list of proper nouns and tell them that proper nouns begin with capital letters wherever they find themselves in a sentence, in a paragraph, or a structure. But we do not get them to understand. We do not critique the understanding of why they are proper nouns, why they do not take, most of them do not take articles. You get it? So with this understanding, the learner is always passive, depending on the teacher to learn. Right. And also, it does not account for why there are errors. Why students continue to make mistakes or errors. Now, there's a difference between mistake and error. Okay, mistakes, when you say a learner has made a mistake is when the learner is able to acknowledge the deficits and then the child is able to correct them. An error occurs when the child doesn't know and the child cannot correct themselves. For example, we are reading an essay and you see that the child is spelling bad as in D-A-D. That is, and you can see it consistently through the essay. It could be that the child doesn't know how to spell bad. So the child cannot correct himself, and that is what we call an error. Now, behaviorism cannot account for why learners make mistakes and then errors in language learning. The fact is that if we are saying that the child learns directly from the teacher, and you know very well as a teacher, you have taught the child the correct thing. Why is it that when you give the child an exercise, the child is still repeating wrong output? Why? If we are saying that the child learns only from the teacher, and the teacher has given the child the correct input, why is it that the child is always getting it wrong? Okay, it means that it is false. It means that we are getting it wrong when we say the child is not thinking. The child may be getting what you are saying it's wrong because the child has seen something similar somewhere, and perhaps there is a confusion or a conflict between what the child has seen somewhere and what you have taught the child. You see, so the fact that there are still errors and mistakes in learning shows that the learners are not passive after all. The learners, one way or the other, they bring in what they know from their first language or from their environment outside the school into the learning situation. Right. For example, um, 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 sometimes you hear our learners speak English language, and it seems that it is a direct translation from their local language to English. And you have been teaching them the correct thing for a long time. They are still not picking. It is therefore showing that it is not true that they learn only from the teacher. They learn from other aspects too. Their background knowledge also enforces or has um, an effect on what they learn in the class. So that is one critique against the behaviorist theory. And finally, okay, I also mentioned that it disregards what goes on in the mind of the child. That is how come it can't account for errors in language learning. Okay. And also, it encourages meaningless memorization and repetition. Okay. Because it is said that in behaviorist theory, repeating the habits, repeating the activity will help you to produce the response. The learners will just be memorizing without really understanding the concept. Okay, they cram the material, memorize it, and then they are, because they don't have understanding, they are unable to apply them in diverse contexts. That is how come we still have learners that have graduated from the high school, but they cannot write a letter for application for a job. Okay, it is because perhaps they learned the structure of a formal letter, but they have not internalized it. They do not still understand its significance in the outside world. Okay, so that is one negative effect of a behavioral philosophy. If you are employing behaviorism in your class, it will help the learners form the habits. They can write very well, but they can't apply it in a context that you've not taught them. Okay. Encourages meaningless memorization. All right. So that is what we um we mean by behaviorism. So we said that it is built on the tenet that learning should be observable. Learning occurs when a stimuli is provided, and then we ensure that the stimuli must produce a response. Now, to produce the response, you have to repeat the action. It has to, there's repeated action, and repeated action leads to habit formation. Now, if the action is repeated and the response, you want to ensure that the learner produces a proper response, you have to provide reinforcement. Okay, and the reinforcement can be positive. It can be positive when you provide something good to ensure that the habit is repeated. It is negative when you deny the child of something right, something they enjoy, to ensure that they are producing the right output. And then we have looked at some criticisms against the behaviorist theory. We said that it encourages passivity in learners, okay, and then also it encourages meaningless memorization. It also does not explain the occurrence of errors in language learning. And also, lastly, I think I didn't mention, it ignores social context of learning. Social context of learning, because it emphasizes how do you call memorization. Learners are not able to learn and apply within context. Okay, right. And also, as part of the social context, it ignores the fact that The social environment also has a role to play in the learner's language acquisition, right? Everything is centered on the teacher, and then how far the teacher is able to get the learners to get the learning to acquire the language, but it doesn't factor other issues like the peers. Okay, the peers, for example, that also help the learners to acquire the language, and also other social factors too that help in language acquisition. All right, so that is behaviorism. Oh, any question for us? Okay, so now you move on to the next theory that explains language learning. The next theory is what we call cognitive theory. Cognitive theory came out as a result of the criticisms that are associated with behaviorist theory. I mentioned in behaviorism that the behaviorism is built on the fact that learning is external, not internal. Learning is external, not internal. It means that whatever the child learns is not something that is inherent in the child. It was given out from the environment to the child. Okay. And also, I said that so the child doesn't have that innate ability to learn language on their own. They depend on an external input to help them to learn. They depend on a stimuli to help them to learn. Now, also, that learners are passive throughout the learning process. All right. Now, based on these criticisms, the cognitive theory emerged. This theory is the direct opposite of the behaviorist theory. This cognitive theory emphasizes that the learner has an innate ability to learn a language. Inside the brain of the child are structures that helps the child to learn a language. Right. So therefore, the learner does not only solely depend on an external input to help the child to learn a language. Inside the brain of the child are wired language structures that helps the learner to learn a language. Are you following, class? Good. So they believe that the learner has mental structures that helps them to process and learn a language on their own. So in this sense, human beings have innate, inborn abilities that helps them to understand what they are learning. So they do not necessarily need to depend on the external stimuli to help them to learn a language. Now, cognitivists are saying that everyone has a sense of language in them. Everyone has a sense of grammar in them. Right. So that is the cognitive theory. So in this sense, the teacher will not be the sole provider of what the child will need to learn a language. We believe that the child also has that innate ability. Right. Now, because so now the theory is built on two principles. And I believe I've already mentioned some of the principles. First principle of the behaviorist theory is that one, the memory system is an actively organized processor of information. Okay, the learner has a memory system. Okay, inside her it is wired in their brain, and it helps them to process information. So they don't need you to repeat the action before the child will process the information. They have the ability inwardly to learn and process the information. Okay, now The second principle, they believe that prior knowledge plays an important role in learning. Now, because they believe that the learner already has the inbuilt ability, it means that the learner already has experience on what you are teaching the learner. Okay? The learner is not a passive, the learner is not an empty slate. The learner already has an idea, let me put it this way, an idea or a previous knowledge or experience concerning what you are teaching the learner. And then at one point in time, that is what the learner will build on to learn what you are giving them in the classroom. So if you're about to teach them nouns in the classroom, according to this theory, the learner already knows what nouns are. They are coming from an environment. They know. They have seen animals before. They name animals in their local language. So then when they come to class, it is just for you to pull out that previous knowledge that they have concerning nouns and build on it to teach them the concept of nouns in English language. So that is what the theory is saying. Okay, so I'm highlighting them for you. So prior knowledge plays important role. Without the prior knowledge, it becomes difficult for the learner to understand or make meaning out of what you are teaching them currently in the classroom. Right. So that is the basic concept regarding cognitive theory. Right. So because they believe that the learner has a mental capacity or mental structures that helps them to learn a language, they don't believe in rote memorization. They don't believe in memorization and repetition of the action. All they emphasize is that mention or give the learner, direct the learner to their previous knowledge. Just direct the learner to their previous knowledge. Okay? Build on their RPK, as we used to say. Build on the RPK, and when you get the RPK, they will be able to learn the new material. That is what the cognitive people are saying. So you don't need to do memorization before they learn. That is what the cognitive theorists are saying. Now, they also believe in meaningful learning. They are saying that if a child should learn, the learning should necessarily be meaningful. What is meaningful learning? Meaningful learning is meaningful when you can relate it to your previous knowledge. So that is why it is from this cognitive theory. That is why we used to have RPK in our formal lesson plans, and now we have learning experiences, relevant learning experiences. Right. All right. So that is the cognitive theory. So they are saying that the learner can remember the new material you are teaching them only when it is linked to their prior knowledge on the material. If you want them to understand what adjectives are, link them to their prior knowledge on adjectives. All right, good. So this is a contrast to rote learning, as in the behaviorism, where they are saying that the learner doesn't have any previous knowledge. Give them what you want to teach them and let them repeat it. Let them repeat it. They will get the knowledge. The cognitive people are saying, no, the learner has it. Build on their previous knowledge and then teach them what is new. And then they will remember it. So that is with the cognitive theory. All right. So let me stop here. If anyone has a question regarding this theory. Class, are you here?
Madam, we are
Yes,
following.
yes, we are following.
Yes, please, we are around.
Oh, okay. Okay. Someone is giving me a thumbs up. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. So let's continue. So yes. So The next thing we will talk about, the next theory we'll talk about is called the Krashen's hypothesis on language learning. Now, Stephen Krashen theory of language learning, unlike the two that we have learned previously, this theory is built on five hypotheses. They are built on five hypotheses. They are saying that with all these hypotheses met, language learning and acquisition can take place. Okay, good. So we are going to go through Krashen's five hypotheses of second language theory. So now, to begin, I would like to emphasize that this theory explains language learning and acquisition through five hypotheses. That is the meaning of this theory. It's explaining language learning through five hypotheses. Now, we are going to go through the hypothesis one after the other. The first hypothesis is the acquisition learning hypothesis. The second one is monitor hypothesis. The third is natural order hypothesis. The next is input hypothesis. And finally, affective filter hypothesis. Now, the first one, acquisition learning hypothesis, you can see two things there, acquisition and learning. Now, Krashen is saying that there are two issues here, language acquisition and language learning. There are some distinctions between them. When we say language acquisition, we are saying that the process and natural ways by which a person gets to get a language. I don't want to use acquire again. Okay, the natural process to which a person gets to know a language. So this happens in your L1. When you're learning your L1, you don't have to go to school necessarily to learn how to speak your L1. So it goes through a natural process. Okay, so that is the meaning of language acquisition. So language acquisition occurs through a natural process. It is independent of a classroom structure. Okay, good. But when we come to language learning, that is when we intentionally teach the person the grammar and the structure of the language, like we do in the classroom. So while language acquisition is done subconsciously, okay, when you were learning your L1, it was done subconsciously. As you were talking to your parents, observing your parents, interacting with people in your environment, you got the language subconsciously. You didn't have to go to school, okay, to learn your L1. So language acquisition occurs subconsciously, but with language learning, it is intentional. The person has to go through school to learn a language. So that usually occurs in our second languages. Okay, now this explains how come someone comes from the United Kingdom. Okay, the person is able to speak the British English fluently, but they really find it difficult to write. Okay, yes, they find it difficult to write. They can even find it difficult to spell. Okay, you've had some British people who even say, "How is you? How is you?" I knew one British man who would say, "How is you?" He says it subconsciously, "How is you?" Okay, so even though that is his first language, he has learned it subconsciously. So if you go to school and they start teaching you the grammar of English, the oral of English, the phonetics of English, they start teaching you how to write English. That one is called language learning. Right. So Krashen is saying that there are distinctions between these two processes. Language gets to a person in two different ways, either through the acquired system or the learned system. The acquired system is done subconsciously. Please take note. Okay. The acquired system occurs subconsciously, in a natural environment. It doesn't need a classroom system for you to learn. But the learn system it goes through an intentional process, a deliberate process to help you to learn the language. Now, so he's saying that we get a language through these two systems, the acquired and learned system. And this is a fundamental construct in his hypothesis. Now, he's saying that so I've explained the acquired system and then the acquisition system here. So the acquired system is a subconscious process. The learned system goes through a formal conscious process. Right. So in this sense, Stephen Krashen is saying that language learning occurs through two systems. It is either the person is getting the language subconsciously, independent of instructions in the grammar or the science of the language, or the person gets to know a language through the learn system, where we intentionally take the person through the formal or the science of the language. When I mean the science of the language, the grammar of the language, the various means of writing in the language. Right. So that is the first hypothesis. The second hypothesis is the monitor hypothesis. The monitor hypothesis. Now, the monitor hypothesis is trying to relate the acquired system and the learned system. Okay. This monitor system is saying that there is a relationship between the acquired system and the learned system that we spoke of as the first hypothesis. Now, he's saying that the learned system influences the acquired system. The learned system influences the acquired system. That is the meaning of the monitor hypothesis. Now, what I mean by the learned system influencing the acquired system is that, you see, I mentioned that the learned system is when you go through formal instructions into the language. So you know the grammar of language. So when you are speaking English, when you are communicating and you make a mistake, it is the learned system that prompts you that check your concord and then you correct yourself immediately. Right. So that is what we mean by the learned system influencing the acquired system. We need the learned system to help us to communicate effectively. Right. So that is what we mean by the monitor system. So the monitor system is saying that the learned system serves as a monitor for the acquired system, because the learned system knows the appropriate structure of the language. It is able to monitor how we communicate with the language. So it is because of the learn system that is how come an individual can write and then say, oh, I've made a mistake here, let me correct myself. At that point, your learn system is being active. It is controlling or editing the acquired system. So that is the meaning of the monitor hypothesis. Now, according to Krashen, there are three ways. There are three ways that a person can use their monitor. That is the learn system. Okay, there are three ways he can use them. An individual can either be an underuser, an overuser, or an optimal user. Please, let's take note. An overuser, an underuser, an optimal user. An individual who overuses their monitor, they are those people that we call them the autocorrect people, right? Everything they say, they will stop to, hey, am I correct or wrong? Okay. Those people, if you give them your script to edit for you, they never finish. They never finish editing. Okay. They are very, very, very attentive to errors and mistakes. They are very, very attentive. If you have a student like that, the person always finds it difficult to communicate in class because the person is always thinking about the accuracy of what they are saying. Instead of focusing on just communicating, they are focusing on the correctness of it. So it prevents them from being to flow in their communication, right? And if you are a teacher too and your students realize that you're an autocorrect person, they find it difficult talking to you. They are always anxious when they are contributing in class because they will say that the moment I start talking, madam will say, hey, don't say that way, say is, say that, say that. Okay. So the overusers are people who are actively using their learning system, but the effect is that they are unable to communicate freely. It obstructs communication because you are always thinking about the accuracy of it. You rather allow the learner to finish what they are saying, and then after they have finished telling you what they want to say, you understand what they mean, then you tell them that, oh, this one was supposed to, maybe you should have said it that way. Especially when students write essays, okay? Before you score them down for an expression of something, okay, you can call the learner. What did you mean by this thing that you wrote? What did you mean? Okay, sometimes the learner has the idea, but the expression is what is the problem. So you have to understand where the learner was coming from. That is what we call the process approach to writing. Okay, you understand what the learner was coming from, and then if you understand where they are coming from, you're able to correct them, right? But if we don't give them an environment where they are free to communicate, you will not even see the mistakes or their errors or their deficits in language. So that is an effect of those who are overusers of their monitor. Now we have people who are underusers. They don't care about anything at all. All they care is that they are speaking. If the concord is wrong, like they don't care about anything. You pick their script and it's full of mechanical issues. Okay. All they care about is that you understood what I was saying. Those are what we call the underusers. No, those people too, the learn system is still needed for better communication. So if there are mistakes in what they are producing, it becomes difficult for you to really understand and follow what they are saying. And we have those who are optimal users. Optimal users are the best users, okay? They know how to balance the use of their monitor so that it doesn't impede on their communication. So these are the three users. Now, the users of the monitor, they have been associated to character traits, okay? Usually, extroverts are known to be underusers because they want to talk. They want to tell you what is in their minds. They don't have time to monitor whether the concord is correct or not. They are speaking. So usually it is said that extroverts are usually underusers of monitors and introverts are overusers of the monitors. Okay. Now let's go to the next hypothesis. We have an hypothesis called hypothesis called natural order hypothesis. Natural order hypothesis. Now, with this natural order, it is saying that language occurs at a certain defined order. There is an order, a natural order with which language acquisition occurs. There are critical stages with which the learner can learn a language. When that stage lapses, it becomes difficult for the person to learn a language. And then there's a stage with which, an order with which a learner can learn the structure of a language, especially grammar. Okay, so that is what has informed our curriculum regarding the teaching of grammar. We realize that we learn nouns from crèche to the university levels. We learn now. Since you are doing English language education, I know that in your content, sentence and its parts, you have learned nouns. But you see, the way you are learning nouns in the tertiary, if you had learned it in primary school, you would have given up on English language. You would have just said, I will not learn English again. Why is it so? There is an order with which your brain works with input at a specific period of time. So that is what this hypothesis is saying. There is a natural order with which we learn a language, okay, and how we learn grammar as well. Let's go. So the next hypothesis, or the last but not least, the next hypothesis, the fifth hypothesis is the input hypothesis. Input hypothesis. Now, this one is associated with the acquisition system and not with the learn system. Now, with the input system, they are saying that if you want a learner to acquire a language, you have to give the person the input, give the person the language, and then the child will learn. Right. So that is it. So you have to give the person an input that is comprehensible. The learner can understand. Okay, so with this input hypothesis, they are saying that at any stage in the learner's acquisition, the learner has to be exposed to comprehensible input that is an addition to what they previously knew, right? So we have something called comprehensible input, or plus one, in this hypothesis. Okay, so at every level, when the child comes to your class, at every level, there is an addition to what the child already knows. That is what we mean by input hypothesis. However, this input should be something that the learner can make meaning to. If the learner doesn't make meaning to that input, it is not comprehensible, and then learning becomes difficult. Right. Now, by implication, this input is saying that at every level, the learner has to, when you are designing the syllable for an example, you have to take note that first, there is a level with which the learner can learn a language. And at each level, you have to increase or add to what they already know. So that is what informs our syllable. So in crèche, we learned nouns. Primary, we learned nouns, in addition to what we did in crèche. Sorry, in KG, right? You go to the high school, you learn nouns. An addition is added. You come to the tertiary, you are still learning nouns. An addition is added. So that is what we mean by input, or comprehensible input. The final hypothesis is the affective filter hypothesis. Now, this one is telling us that there are some issues that affect whether the input that you have given to the child, whether it will stick in the child's brain or not. There are some factors, okay, that determine them. And that is what we call the affective filter. Okay, if you know a filter is something that strains, right? If you have a sieve and you are pouring out something, it will strain out the water and leave the particles behind, right? In the same way, when we are learning a language, there is a filter in learning language. Now, when the filter is high, it means that whatever you teach the child, it will pass through the drain and go, and the child will not keep anything. But when the filter is low, the child is able to keep some of the input you give to the child. Right. So this is what we mean by affective. So affective filter are some variables that affect the possibility of the input you have taught the child, you've given to the child, staying in the child's brain. Okay. So they are saying that if the environment motivates the child, the learner has self-confidence in their own language learning abilities, the child has good self-esteem, okay, and then anxiety is lowered, then the affective filter will be lowered. And when the affective filter is lowered, it means that comprehensible input plus one will stay in the child's brain. But if the environment, there is always anxiety, the child has very low self-esteem regarding their learning abilities, there are some factors that are impeding the child's ability to receive, then it means that the filter has gone high and the child cannot learn anything. And it's true. You realize that days that you go to class and you are so tense, okay, maybe you had a very bad day and you took it out on the children. That day, the children, they will not learn anything. Only a little of the things you teach will stick. They are so anxious. If the classroom environment is tensed, if the child doesn't believe that the things you are teaching them, they can learn on their own, these factors, they raise the filter. And when the filter is raised, it means that input will not stay in their brain, or it will not become comprehensible, and the learning cannot take place. Right. So this is what we mean by the affective filter hypothesis. So in this sense, they are saying that to help the child to learn a language and to keep the input that is provided, the classroom environment should be free and anxiety-free. The child's self-confidence should be increased. Okay, you don't do anything to lower the child's self-confidence in the classroom. Either if that happens, the child cannot learn language. The child doesn't have that how do you call it, freedom and confidence to learn the language. All right. Also, if there are factors in the home that are affecting the child, the filter will raise and the child cannot learn anything. All right. Good. So we have looked at Stephen Krashen's 5 hypothesis language learning. We looked at the acquisition learn system of hypothesis that says that there is a difference. There are 2 ways with which an individual gets to know a language, either through the acquired system or the learned system. Now we came to the monitor hypothesis that says that the learned system helps to edit the acquired system. And then we went to the natural order hypothesis and we said that language learning occurs at a certain defined order. Okay. And then we said that we went to the input hypothesis where we said that at each order or level in the child's language learning, you have to give the child what we call comprehensible input, in addition to what they already know. And then, so with this one, they are striking a relationship between the natural order and then the input hypothesis. At any level in language learning, there is an input you have to give to the child. All right, so when they get to primary school, you add up to what they have learned before primary school. So that is the relationship between the natural order and the input hypothesis. And now we went to the affective filter hypothesis that states that there are some variables that can either enhance or impede language learning. That is what we call the affective filter. When the affective filter is high because the child is anxious, the learning environment is not friendly, the child has low self-esteem, it means that the input that you have given the child, no matter the level, the input you give to the child, there is a possibility that the input will not stay, or the input will not be, the child will not understand the input. But if the affective filter is lowered, that is, the child is confident, the environment is friendly, there's absence of anxiety, then the child will be able to keep the input that you are giving to them. So that is the Krashen's hypothesis. Right. That is a lot. I've spoken a lot. All right, popcorn.
Yes. Please, I'm a little bit confused concerning the monitor and then the learning system. The one that performs.
Popcorn. Come again.
Please.
Come
I
again,
want to
popcorn.
get something clear on it between the monitor and the learning system.
Hello. Yeah,
What?
popcorn. We want to hear you.
Hello.
The applied and learning system. Yes. Yes, we can hear you, popcorn.
Between the learning system and the monitor system, if a question should be specific as which one actually performs the correcting and editing function, is it the monitor or the learning system?
The learn system is what forms the monitor. Okay. It is the learn system forms the monitor. So the learn system is the monitor. Do you get it? The learn system is the monitor. So the thing that corrects the error is the learn system. Please, are you following, popcorn?
Okay.
Yes, it is the learn system that monitors, that does the editing. Okay, so the monitor system is, or the editor system is the learned, the monitor or the editor is the learned system. It is the learn system that does the editing or the monitoring. Yeah, so that is it. Good. But popcorn, what's your real name?
Maupemo.
Maupemo. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. So, any other questions? But if Malcolm, if the question comes in this way, okay,
Yes.
if it comes in a different way, where they are asking which hypothesis, okay, or which system in Krashen's theory, okay, talks about the fact that of correction. If they make emphasis on what, how do you call it, what hypothesis, okay, then we go for the monitor hypothesis, okay, or what system, then we go to the monitor. But actually, it is the learn system that serves as the monitor. So there's no distinction between the learn system being the editor or the monitor, but the whole hypothesis is called the monitor hypothesis. It talks about how the learn system edits the acquired system. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so any more questions?
Yeah, madam, please, I would like us to answer the objective questions over here so that I can see how it goes.
Okay, so they said we should distinguish between which parts? Between the interactionist view. Oh, okay, with this one, I would like that we finish treating the interactionist theory, then we'll come back to it and then we'll answer it ourselves.
All right, that would be good.
Okay, so let's go to the interactionist theory. Good. Now, with this theory, they are saying that, okay, language learning itself occurs when we interact with our environment. When we interact with our environment. So the individual is able to learn a language because they are interacting with their environment. Please, you get it? So with the interactional view, learning occurs when you interact with the individuals concerned in your environment. And then comprehensible input comes from the environment that we are talking about. Please, are you following? Good. So the interactional view, they look at the social culture aspect of language learning, where they believe that the social context or the cultural context helps the learner to learn the language. So in this sense, input will come from interacting with people in the learning environment. Okay, but with Krashen's view, he's looking at comprehensible input as a system in necessarily the classroom environment that is provided by an instructor. But with the interactionist point of view, input can come from any aspect of the environment of the learner. Okay, input can even come from the peers of the learner, anyone that the learner. So, and then input can come from a more knowledgeable person, who could be the teacher, a peer, or someone else. Comprehensible input can come from the child interacting with tests like textbooks. Okay, good. So that is the distinction there. So with the interactionist point of view, input comes from the entire social environment where the learner can interact and get the input from. Right. And also, okay, so let's look at the interactionist point of view in depth. Okay. Now, the interactionist point of view suggests that interaction facilitates second language acquisition. And that because conversational and linguistic modifications that occur in this course provides learners with necessary comprehensible linguistic input. So it means that this course simply means here interaction. So we get in the input in the language as we engage in interaction from people in that linguistic environment. That is what we mean by how do you call it? The interaction point of view. Now it says in second language acquisition is that such as so Krashen emphasizes comprehensible target language input, which is one-way input. Okay, one-way input means that it comes from only one aspect, either from the teacher. Okay, but with the interactionist point of view, it can come from two-way communication. Okay, in terms of language learning, so it can come from either as the learner is interacting with either a knowledgeable other, a peer within the communicative context. Okay, so with this one, input doesn't come from only one side. There are multiple ways on which the individual can get to their input. And also they are saying that interactionists agree that comprehensible input is crucial element, but they believe that its input alone is not the fundamental. Okay, if you give the person the input, that doesn't mean that the person has. That doesn't mean that is not the optimum way of learning a language. The learner should get an environment where they can interact with what you have given to them. Okay, so in this sense, input and interaction must work together. Please, are we looking? So that's another dimension on how the Krashen's hypothesis input is different from the interactionist point of view. Okay, so from this perspective, according to the interaction point of view, input and interaction must come hand in hand for language learning to take place. But with Krashen's input hypothesis, we are dealing with only input for language learning to take place. So in Krashen's hypothesis, input without interaction can lead to language learning. But with the interactionist point of view, input has to go with interaction. Okay, interacting with the input, interacting with your social environment to ensure that learning takes place. Please, are you following? Good. So that is the distinction.
Yeah.
So that's the distinction. So with the interaction, if they believe that discourse, they emphasize discourse in language learning, there has to be interaction. There has to be interaction with their environment. Interaction, they're saying that one important figure in this interactionist point of view is a scholar called Vygotsky. Okay, Vygotsky, he's from the social interactionist point of view. He's saying that it is good, okay, for the learner to get the input and keep in their brain. It's good, but the learner will learn language best when they are interacting with it. So you see, so the interactionist point of view, input should work with interaction. All right, good. So Long believes that what makes an input to be comprehensible is modified interaction or negotiation of meaning. Okay, so from the interactionist point of view, even the input depends on how meaning is established through interaction. Okay, for example, sometimes in the classroom, it isn't everything that we say. No, learners do not have the same meaning with us when we communicate. You are a when from if that is song.
Please, am I the only person who is not hearing what Madam is saying?
No,
Let's say we are all not.
Wait,
we
no, you're
can't
not.
hear her.
No, please.
Then I think she may be having a network problem at her end.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
It may be so.
The Uh,
Hello.
Hi.
Madam as well.
Fit. No. To
I suggest our rep prompt her so that she can
and
disconnect and come back.
I agree with you.
I do.
either
Hmm?
in fit.
So she's talking there. And that's what she's doing. Oh. Yeah.
Yes. Any upon
Alhamdulillah.
to where let
Please, what has you helped? Someone should come here and at least know what is going on,
say
please.
it's just fine. It's and and
Madam, please, we are finding it difficult to hear you.
go
Please, madam, we are not hearing you anymore.
I you the it's
No.
like act shoot Behave has to
I don't know.
be
We don't talk to no.
of
I said, "No, I know something make it."
le- pe- acting okay. Same
Plain rice and stew. Plain rice and stew.
Hello.
Hello.
Please, how's the class ended?
Hello.
No, it seems the network.
Okay.
We are sure that
And we are calling call to hear Madam. It's a code. If you can prompt her so that she adjusts herself.
They say hair is uncountable, but I can count yours.
He said,
Hair is uncountable, but I can count yours.
hey, hey, rich hair.
18. But it's just not there.
I bet this one is great. Yeah, bounty, you can count it. But yeah, cast it since. Really, one day. I probably. I'm not even going to
Make yours.
Watch on a full trip, no way. Oh,
Please, she's coming in. She didn't know she went off.
Yeah, Sister Yaya, please can you go and call Madam for us?
I have called her. She didn't know her network was off. So she
Okay,
said she
okay,
will reconnect.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, please, I'm back. I don't know the network here. It keeps on coming and going. Please, can you see the screen?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what is happening here. The network, it keeps going and coming. All right. So I was saying here that the constructivist theory, because they believe that learners are independent and they are able to construct their own experiences or knowledge, the teacher's role is just to facilitate them. The teacher does not feed them with the knowledge. You just
Madam.
feed.
Hello.
Yes.
Please, whilst you were discussing the interactionist view, the network was interrupting, so we didn't hear anything.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So which part didn't you get?
So you were on a Long's view. Long's believes that what makes
Okay.
input. Yeah.
What makes okay. So we mentioned that feedback is what an essential aspect of interaction. Okay, feedback. Okay, so we are saying that whenever there's an emphasis is input, comprehensible input. Okay, now for a learner to get to that input, we said that interaction is needed and that the quality of interaction enhances the quality of the input, right? So then feedback is essential. Okay, how would the learner, how would, for example, the teacher get to know of the input, whether the input that the child has is right, or whether the input that the child, whether the child has even gotten the input itself is through feedback in interaction. Okay, and then when the child is, for example, posing a question in class, The child needs your feedback to help the child attain the level of comprehension. If there is a question on the child's mind, at that point, the child is on a state of confusion and uncertainty. It is when the question is answered, that is when the child gets the +1 of the comprehension. These are reflected. So that is the essence of feedback. So feedback is what helps the learner to get the input and produce an appropriate output when necessary. And also we said that in terms of discourse, at the discourse level, okay, now let me emphasize that part of the interactionist theory essential is the issue of discourse. And by discourse, we are meaning in interaction. Similarly, verbal interaction, okay, where parties are involved and there's an exchange of meaning. That is what we mean here by the discourse. Now, they're saying that at the discourse level, okay, to ensure that the input is achieved, okay, we emphasize that feedback is essential. Now, there are different ways with which we can get this feedback that we are talking about at the discourse level. So you mentioned the issue of recasts, okay? In the classroom, there is a question, there is a suggestion, a student is giving out something. You can ask the learner, can you rephrase what you just said? Come again with what you are saying. Okay, this establishes meaning or comprehension in feedback. And also, we set comprehension checks during interaction also enhances feedback. And then had clarification requests at any point in time. You can ask for clarification concerning an input during communication, and then you can do self-repetition to ensure that the people listening to you are getting it, what you are saying. You can paraphrase, restate. So all of these things are things we do during interaction that helps people to get what we are saying, the input. So we can try them in the classrooms. All right. So from the interactions point of view, we went to the next theory called the constructivist theory. Now with this, I started by saying that with this, I want to strike the relationship between three theories, right? The behaviorist, cognitivist, constructivist. That will help us to understand where constructivism is coming from. Now, the behaviorists are saying that the learner is an empty slate. The learner needs an external stimuli, an input from somewhere to help them learn. Now, the cognitivists are saying that no, the learner has the input device, that innate ability to learn language. They have the structure that helps them to learn the language. So at any point, it is not only the teacher's input that helps them to learn. They have it. They have an experience, learning experience already. And all we need to do as teachers is to pick or build on those experiences to help them to learn. Now, we have constructivists who are saying that the learners do not only have that inbuilt ability, okay, they are also able to do something with that ability that they have. They are able to construct and reconstruct knowledge. They don't only use the knowledge we give them, they build something out of the knowledge. That is the constructivist theory. Please, are you following?
Yes, please.
Yeah, madam.
So, yeah. So that is where constructivism came from. So we are going to look at the tenets of constructivism. So I think I've already echoed that. Why am I hearing my voice like that? Hey, no one is replaying my voice to me now. Right. Okay, let me mute someone. Someone is, yeah. Now I can hear that I'm speaking like an adult once. Anyways, um, yeah, so the constructivist perspective, basic to it is the key idea in constructivism is that learners can construct their own knowledge. Okay, they can use it. It is not only that they use their experiences only, they are able to build new experiences. They are able to construct something. They don't only rely on the experience, they construct out of the experience. Okay, so if you are a constructivist teacher or a teacher practicing constructivism, you do not give the learners the input, you only direct them to get into the input, because according to this theory, learners can construct their own knowledge themselves. They can. All we need to do is to direct them to where they have to go to get the knowledge. They are also able to reconstruct from what we teach them. They can critique and reconstruct from what we have taught them. Okay, so in this sense, according to constructivist theory, knowledge is not fixed. It is fluid and expanding. Okay, knowledge is fluid and expanding. What we mean is that as the learner continues to explore, the more the learner is gaining something new, the more the learner is able to construct something new from the learning situation. And the more they are learning, the more the knowledge bases are expanding. You get it? So knowledge is not fixed as the ones we give them. Knowledge is fluid. We can expand on knowledge. That is what the constructivists are saying. It acknowledges the role of social context and environment in learning. Yes. Yes. So the context and then the learning environment enhances learning. If the environment is explorative, the learner is able to to learn. Right. So now we would look at, so that was just the introduction into it. Let's now go into the theory itself. All right. Okay, so our time is almost up. So this is the fundamental of the theory. It says that learners can, there is no limit to knowledge according to this theory. There is no limit to knowledge. If we direct our learners properly, they can produce knowledge out of the content that we have. So from this perspective, the teacher's only role is to facilitate. So you are not a teacher with this, you are what? A facilitator. And this theory encourages a lot of experimental learning, because it is when the learners are doing something that they can construct learning. And also we have to just merely expose the learners to the material and lead them to critique the material. That is only when they can reconstruct new knowledge from the material. So that is the constructivist point of view. So in this, there's nothing like rote learning. There's active learning. The learner understands the learning situation. They can therefore make new meaning out of them or new discoveries out of them. Now, essential with the constructivist perspective is what we call the social constructivist perspective. Now, they are looking at constructivism from the social perspective. They believe that the learner is able to construct new knowledge with the help of their social environment. Okay, that is why they brought social constructivism. Their environment helps them to construct new knowledge. So the learners, from the social constructivist perspective, the learners cannot learn on their own. They can't construct knowledge on their own. They need the help of their social environment to help them to learn. There are two factors, or there are two important issues in the social constructivist theory. We have one called the zone of proximal development, and then we have let me show us first. The zone of proximal development is here. Yeah, and then there's something we call scaffolding as well. So I'm showing you the zone of a picture of that explains the zone of proximal development, and then there's another thing called scaffolding. Now, zone of proximal development means that at any point of learning, let's take this.
Madam.
When you are going, yes.
Please,
Hello.
Yes, madam.
You have another class after this.
Yes, please.
Okay. So let's end here. But reading assignments, let's read on ZPD and then scaffolding for next week.
Yes, madam.
All right. So thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful day.
Madam, next week, do you have class?
Yes.
I thought it's a revision week.
Oh. I am
we will meet
here. I'm going to take us through the content. Okay.
Madam, so next week we meet.
Yes.